Now our special documentary. It's a report as much about love as death. Death which for many people is an end in pain and isolation that induces desolation, a negation of human life. And it doesn't need to be like that. Like most other people, the Irish don't like to think too much about death. And yet every year, 7,000 people die in Irish hospitals, and even more die at home or in isolation, often in severe pain. There are few doctors or nurses trained to care for the special needs of the dying, the bereaved, or those in pain. Pain and suffering remain an unexplored mystery, too often a dehumanizing end to life. No one to sort out the psychological, cultural, environmental, as well as physical aspects of a complex experience. We have to try to understand the real meanings of pain. In time of war, more people suffer more injuries and more pain than at any other time. But the pain suffered can have a meaning, a purpose. Heroism, selflessness, patriotism, service to nation, town, village, home, family and friends. If you had a limb shot off or suffered burns, you were a casualty for a cause. You could feel like a hero. And look at real battle scenes. Severely wounded soldiers seem almost relaxed. Injuries that reduce civilians to tears, born with extraordinary courage. And why? What made this pain on the field of battle different? Heroism was a motive, comrades a help. A severe wound, a ticket for home. But the injury and the suffering was real enough. The horrors of war raised new questions about the meaning of pain. There's one thing for sure, that there are people in Ireland today, too many people, suffering a great deal of unnecessary, dehumanizing pain. When you suffer that kind of pain, when you have to live with it, it dominates your life. You can think of nothing else. The hospice movement refuses to tolerate that inhumanity, and later we'll be giving a telephone number where you can get help. But we start with what used to be known as the Hospice for the Dying, should be called the Hospice for the Living. The hospice gives you two very important promises. There'll be no pain, and you'll never be alone. This, then, is a programme about faith, hope and charity and great courage. It's about people. Not all the patients live in the hospice. You can meet them getting off the bus or passing by in the street. Breda is one of an increasing number who continue to work. She lives and is cared for at home. Nothing about this young woman to suggest a zombie on a drugged half-life. Did Breda's decision to stay on at work help her with her illness?
Oh, tremendously. Tremendously. Because I don't think of myself as being sick.
But Breda is sick, very sick, and yet she can do most of the things she wants to do. The spread of secondaries affects her back. When she bends down, it hurts. But life is for living, and Breda is prepared to just carry on.
Tell me about the cottage.
I'd love to. Can I show it to you?
Sure.
Tim refuses to let his illness get him down. After several major operations at a Dublin hospital, he came to the hospice with very mixed feelings. He's still living for tomorrow and the cottage that he and his wife bought and renovated for retirement. Sickness is a disruption in a life that was always orderly and methodical. Tim likes to show the way work on the house progressed. He's a man for whom achievement is important. Tim has always done things. He doesn't want to stop.
I love flowers. I love everything that grows.
Pauline's been in the hospice for a year. An active young woman, she was diagnosed as having incurable cancer. The hospice has become home, its garden, her bower. How does a modern young woman come to terms with illness? How does she face death?
You never think of death until you're faced with the reality that your life may not be so long. And as I say, it's an awful shock in the beginning, but little by little, it can be overcome. I try not to think of myself as dying, but of rather passing on to another life.
You want to buy this one?
Yeah.
And what of the bereaved? Mary Noon's young husband suffered terrible pain from his cancer until he went to the hospice. That pain changed his personality.
During and after, I thought of it being like being in a war, as being like in a war, you know. I don't think either Chris or I were exceptional. I think just that when people are in the situation, they have to get on with it, and you do.
Dr. John McCarthy took Chris Noon's pain away. How does he answer those who argue that heavy dosages of painkillers are wrong, that they must always shorten human life?
Well, I would think people would have a tendency to live longer in Howells Cross.
There's nothing very rewarding or uplifting about suffering unnecessary pain. Some may cling to the cruel equation that more suffering in this life means more rewards in the next. It's too often a poor argument for bad medical practice. Doctors and nurses are still trained to cure diseases. But what about caring for pain and tending those in the final stages of a battle when disease has won? Should we still let disease conquer the spirit? Those questions are at the heart of Paul Blanchfield's special report. It centres on the hospice movement, still a small movement in Ireland. There are hospices like Milford House in Limerick, St Patrick's, Wellington Road in Cork. But the best known is in Dublin. Harold's Cross, a busy intersection. From early morning, the bustle of traffic fighting its way across the canal into and out of the city. Behind walls, away from the rush of the centre, a tranquility, a site that reflects the promise that here you can find comfort and care and peace to the very end.
Our Lady's Hospice in Harold's Cross is part of a movement to come to terms both medically and spiritually with the inevitable. Hospice is a reaction to high-tech medicine, which sees death as the ultimate defeat and not simply a fact of life. When medicine cannot cure, why should it pretend?
You talk a lot in Harold's Cross about a dignified death for patients.
Yes.
What do you mean by the dignity of death?
Well, when if I can illustrate it this way, a patient comes to our door and he is admitted, he or she, and they walk in, and they gradually, over a period of maybe a month, lose all their faculties. They walk in, after a short time they won't be able to walk anymore. After that, they may not be able to feed themselves anymore. After that, they
You're hungry
may
today,
not
Tom?
be able to look after their excretive functions anymore. This process continues remorselessly in many cases until they die.
Now, Bridget. There you are.
There are no visible signs of
Put
death.
some sugars in your tea.
Those who cannot cope are helped.
Mary that used to be out there. She's still on the private.
As they live with their illness, they receive the respect and dignity they have always enjoyed.
They're real painkillers, and that will probably ease it off.
Hello, good afternoon.
The services of the hospice are in demand because they treat people. They dislike the word patient. There is at least one member of staff for each person, a ratio that could never exist in a hospital. General hospitals are geared to getting people well. Terminal illness is not their strong point. Controlling pain is not easy, and many patients are referred to the hospice.
She's a young woman, and it does seem to have deteriorated a lot in the last couple of weeks, and she seems to be in pain. So, I mean,
I don't think we have a choice, do we? I mean, we have to take her in, the lady with the...
Each case presented for admission is evaluated on the patient's physical and mental condition. If there's pain, the answer is always clear.
I think we'll take her in.
Yeah,
I mean, there isn't
we
any
only
way
have one female bed, so...
We'll just have to take her then.
The hospice has just over 220 beds. 40 are reserved specifically for cancer patients.
Right. We have to take her in.
Yeah.
People close to the end are never left alone. There is always comfort. And when religion is important, the sisters are there, in this case, to anoint with holy water. The move to the hospice is not a defeat. General hospitals are orientated to cure, and when cure is not possible, the symptoms of a disease like cancer can be treated. There is always a welcome. The truth is the mainstay of the hospice movement. Many doctors are uncomfortable in dealing with death, and the truth about a patient's condition is often difficult to deliver. Death is a tragedy in someone young. Many older people say they would prefer not to know. There is no policy about telling the truth, but for many people, knowledge of their illness can relieve much anxiety.
What were they like before in the other hospital?
I would have said a bit indifferent. And I was a little bit afraid to ask questions. I asked questions from time to time. But I always got the feeling from them that, you know, I was being a nuisance and you shouldn't ask these questions. And generally they fobbed me off with a lot of medical jargon, which I didn't understand anyway. And I didn't have the courage to tell them that at the time.
Brida's mastectomy resulted in severe back pain, which turned out to be secondary cancer. Her time in St. Vincent's Hospital was the most anxious and depressing in her life.
It made me feel very insecure because I was getting this new face each time and they were saying, oh, you're so-and-so and you've had, you know, reading out my report to me. And I thought, God, I'm sick of listening to this, you know, from a different person each time. And I was telling them about, at that stage I had a pain in my back, which I was telling them about. And they were saying, oh, well, okay, take something for it. And as time went on, the pain became much worse. And they said to me, well, instead of waiting for the pain to get bad, take something in the beginning. Which at that stage, nothing, you know, that I was taking would have done any good anyway. But eventually, when I got to one doctor and asked about the scan, they said, oh, well, there was something, a little spot on it, but we're not worried about it. And in actual fact, that turned out to be secondaries. We found out later.
When you left St. Vincent's, how bad was the pain?
Very, very bad. I was bent over double. I couldn't put on my clothes, couldn't take them off. Couldn't literally do anything. I had to be taken into hospital like that. And they had to take my clothes off and put me into bed. I think I had a dressing gown or something I'd pulled on that morning. And a friend took me in the car. She rang up the hospice and they took me in the car. And within 24 hours they had my pain under control. A friend who worked in the hospice, she had recommended Dr. McCarthy and I went to see him. And he brought it to the attention of the surgeon that I was attending. And then he went back and had a look at my scan and then they decided, okay, you know, there is something there. So their decision was to, but I got the feeling that the surgeon was a bit annoyed about the fact that I was under another doctor. But then they hadn't done anything about my pain and I didn't really have any choice but to go to somebody else at that stage.
When you told them about your pain in the hospital, what did they say?
They just said, take something for it. What have you taken? Say Aspro, Anidin. Well, then try Panadol.
For cancer?
And yes, and then somebody said it in the end, well, take the tablet before the pain really starts to get bad. And I said, but it's there all the time. And they just didn't seem to hear me. They were saying, oh yes, you know, we know you've got pain, but... And I just kept walking out of there without them doing anything about it.
Today, graduates of medical schools know a little more about caring for people who are terminally ill. But control of pain is still not a priority, and wasn't either when Dr. McCarthy graduated from medical school many years ago.
I didn't realise at the time that I could have done as much more for the patients than I did. I didn't realise that I could have produced a level of pain control with the drugs that were available to me then that I do now, because I'm essentially using the same drugs now. I was at times pretty happy with going out to see a patient in the morning and giving the patient an injection, usually of morphine. And then again, last thing at night, go out again and give another injection. And what I really was getting was 2 peaks of pain-free peaks, and there were big valleys in between.
St. Joseph's Hospice in Hackney was where Dr. McCarthy eventually went to work. It was here he learned to scientifically control pain.
Pain and cancer are inseparable in people's minds. Even though apparently about 60% of people only have pain, when a person is told that they have cancer, and they think this is it, you know, I'm going to have very severe pain, and it's very hard to convince either the patient or the relatives that that is not so. We here lay our head on the block sort of thing. We tell the relatives and the patients that no, look, the pain is finished. You will have no more pain, no matter. It may be difficult to do it, but it can be done. And that is a promise, and a promise that has to be kept. It's a very simple principle, but very often ignored, because then you have, having achieved a plateau, of pain-free plateau, the thing to do is keep it that way, keep topping it up.
Bricks and mortar were Chris Noon's business. He built this family home himself 20 miles from Dublin. 39 years old, Chris died of cancer.
I don't think you can really put over to people just how bad things can be, you know, to watching someone in pain like that all the time. And you do feel alone, and you don't know there's help even, you know. It's not like being in a recovery situation where you can look forward to getting better. You've been told that you're terminally ill, that you're not going to get better. You can't say to the person who's suffering, you're just having a bad day, tomorrow might be better. You know inside that tomorrow might be worse and the day after might be worse.
And it got worse for the Noon family. Chris was a bricklayer. He returned home from England to live in Naas. A father of 3 boys in his prime, he was reduced to a shadow of his former self by the most violent pain.
When they opened him, the appendix was all right, and they had to kind of go searching for the cause of the pain. And they found tumours, a great many of them, I believe. 3 of them were causing complete blockages, which accounted for the severe pain.
Never ill before, Chris was always active. In sport he excelled and enjoyed many winning moments. His trophies remain in the sitting room, a reminder of the man he was.
The doctor looking after Chris then suggested a hospice, and I was very much against it at the start because I didn't know how Chris would react. I thought it might just be the last straw, that, you know, he really would give up. But at the same time, I was very aware that something had to be done, you know, to help the pain he was experiencing. And he did go to the hospice, from the hospital to the hospice.
Was there a considerable improvement once he was in the hospice?
There was an unbelievable improvement after 1 day in the hospice.
It's said that when someone is in severe pain, it completely takes over their personality. Did you find that Chris's personality had changed as the pain had got worse at home?
It did, of course, because he was a very happy, fun-loving man. And when you're in severe pain, you don't feel happy and you don't have fun. You know, so there is, of course, a complete personality change.
This doctor has always been concerned with the pain and stress of terminal illness. She strongly believes medicine should play a special role in helping people die, as it does in helping them live. She feels many doctors forget the psychological crisis of dying and mistakenly concentrate exclusively on the illness. Medical inability to deal with death was brought home to her by the condition of her own mother.
At this stage, she was dying and she was at home and had really severe pain, and there were different doctors coming in and out to see her, and all of them were telling her different things, which was confusing her. And she was at the stage where she was afraid to take any of these tablets because they were saying things to her like, you know, those are very strong tablets and maybe you shouldn't take those now, you might need them later on, which of course was inferring that she was going to have worse pain later on, and I'm sure she felt at that stage she couldn't possibly have any more pain than she had.
Do you think GPs are well trained enough to look after people at home, particularly who are terminally ill or who have diseases where they're eventually going to die?
I suppose they're being better trained now because I know 3 or 4 medical students at the moment who seem to be getting very good training from their pharmacology people, not to be afraid of these strong pain-killing drugs, to make sure you use them. But on the whole, it's not something which you're taught to do in medical school at all. Like, you're never taught anything about the care of the dying at home. And your training, there's so little GP involved in your training that you would never see patients dying at home. I mean, you'd see patients dying in hospital, okay. And there, the treatment depends on whether you as a junior have enough authority to go and change orders that have been written by somebody further up the line. You have to be a very confident intern to be able to cross out what the surgeon or the physician has written on the chart and write in what you think should be done.
The medical establishment in general find it very hard to come to terms with the idea of saying, we make a decision, this person can no longer benefit from treatment, so therefore we will just keep them comfortable. How does that affect your work as a GP, like say with public health nurses?
Well, I suppose no doctor likes to admit defeat. I mean, the whole reason that you're existing is to try and help people to stay alive and be well. So when you accept the fact of death, I suppose you're accepting defeat, and that leads to, well, I suppose some doctors just aren't capable of making that decision, you know.
Nurses too play a vital role in caring for the terminally ill. They're the ones who administer morphine in large doses. But for many nurses, it presents a moral problem.
Irish people in particular, and Irish nurses really in particular, are very conservative, and they have very strict views, and I'm sure a lot of them are religious views. I really don't know about drugs. Only last week, one of the nurses who was looking after a patient that I was looking after actually broached the subject of euthanasia with me. You know? So it's very difficult when you get somebody who doesn't think along the same lines as you do, because when you have left a house where you've left behind a whole load of morphine, either in tablet form or injection form, and you've left instructions as to how it should be used, but you've also asked the family to use their own discretion, that if more is needed, to take more. And then you get somebody going in who's sort of tut-tutting and counting the tablets and making statements about how all this treatment can be very harmful. It leaves a lot of confusion and leaves a lot of bad feeling, really, behind. So you do get problems with nurses.
Cavan Town has 3 hospitals, one of which treated local man Jack Sheridan. He had been complaining of stomach pain but was discharged. Home is 800 yards away and he could barely make the walk. Jack died of cancer in this room several weeks ago. A labourer all his life, Jack never married. He lived with his sister. His cancer was not spotted until it was too late. His niece, Mary Rooney.
We told him ourselves that there was something wrong with him, and when they told us in the surgery that he didn't have cancer, I mean, we were relieved, and we just thought then that it was his ulcer that was playing up all the time, until he was sent to Dublin, and then they told us there that he had cancer. And it was was spreading rapidly, like it had gone into his liver at this stage. And that was only, we'd say, maybe within 3 months I'd been told that he hadn't got it, or less even, you know.
How bad was the pain at that stage?
The pain was pretty bad because he was doubled up and two with it. And they were just giving him Tagament tablets now, as far as I can remember, in the surgical, along with the 2 morphine injections they did give him when he went in.
Jack was able to build this back wall for his niece while still attending the hospital. The cancer grew fast, and within weeks he was unable to walk. The drugs he received controlled his pain, but did the family feel strange about administering large doses?
Not really, because we were relieving him of pain and we didn't want him in any pain, so therefore whatever he needed, like, we gave him willingly. We didn't want to have him in any pain. The district nurse, all right, said that she would rather see him in pain and kind of alert, and Dr. Anya wanted him with no pain, which the family did as well, so we kept him without pain as much as we could.
How did she explain her position on not giving him drugs?
Well, she just said that she thought that he was having too much drugs, that she wanted to see him alert, and that was all really, you know. So they said that they didn't want him in any pain at home, and we kept him free from pain.
Was it difficult having the doctor saying one thing and the nurse saying the other?
Well, my aunt did feel very confused at the time, you know, but then she went back to Dr. Anya and she asked Dr. Anya, and Dr. Anya said, do what I tell you, and he won't have any pain. So we done that, and he didn't have that much pain coming up to the end.
And did the district nurse give you any reasons as to why she didn't think he should have so many drugs?
No, she didn't. She just didn't want him drowsy. She said she wanted him alerted.
But it's the same in hospitals, you see. In hospitals, nurses have strict instructions about how much they should give and how often it should be given. But you'll sometimes get somebody who won't ask for more sedation for the patient, and the patient themselves aren't in any position to ask for anything. You know, when you're in hospital and you're lying in a bed and somebody's taken away all your clothes and you're totally vulnerable, you're not really in a position to stand up or to sit up in the bed and say, listen, I'm going out of my head with the pain I have in my stomach. Will you, for God's sake, give me something? And whatever nurse is on duty has given you an injection, say, 3.5 hours before, and you're not due for your next one for another 2 hours. Some nurses will be very good and will just get whatever doctor is on out of bed to sign up the orders for more tablets.
But many nurses don't, either out of fear or other reasons, as Margot McCambridge knows. She has long experience in nursing. A former matron of St. Luke's Cancer Hospital in Dublin, she has first-hand knowledge of how pain is treated. I asked her if, in general, pain was handled well in Irish hospitals.
Generally speaking, again, I would say probably not. I don't believe that there is any justifiable reason nowadays for a patient to be in pain. But I think many healthcare professionals perhaps don't understand the principle of pain control, which is not allowing the pain to break through the threshold. And it is a hard concept, I think, sometimes, because it may mean actually waking up a patient at 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure that they have analgesia in order that they don't wake up at 5 o'clock with pain. But it is sometimes difficult for healthcare professionals to grasp the need for that kind of control.
And what does that add up to for patients?
I suppose that the bottom line is that patients remain in pain and are very distressed. And I have certainly seen this, and it is very distressing to watch. So it must be 10 times more distressing for the patient.
Pauline Ellis has spent a year in the hospice in Harold's Cross. An active life of travelling abroad has been reduced to walking in the rose garden when it's fine. Her cancer is slow and often unpredictable, which is why the news she was terminally ill took a while to come.
I didn't know that a hospice was a place for terminally ill people, and I didn't know that I was terminally ill. They don't tell you overnight, but as time went by, I found out that I was terminally ill, but I found it a very happy place, a place full of joy and laughter, and not at all I mean, you don't find people going around with long faces here, you know, or anything like that. On the contrary, they seem to be in quite good form. And that affects the patient, of course. I got to know some people here, and as time went by, because I've been here a little bit longer than other people, I got to know them, and in the course of time they have died. So I've seen them over a period of their illness and talked to them and that. And I found that when they were coming towards the end of their lives, they seemed very, very happy. They didn't seem at all afraid. You know, they seemed so serene and happy. And I began to think, well, you know, somewhere in my mind, I suppose it registered that my time would come sometime. I don't think about it much, but it must. But I feel that I will probably have the same passing away. I mean, we are human beings with feelings, and I think actually when you realize that you're not well and that you look for sort of kindness, it's very important. You know, I think you get hurt easier by maybe smaller things which you could perhaps cope with when you're stronger and that. And so a smiling face or a good-humoured nurse makes all the difference. Or if you have a good contact with your doctor, if it's very kind of personal, and as long as you don't feel you're just a bed, you know. And here I don't have that feeling, you know.
Well,
they treat you kind of like you feel special, you know. It's not that you actually want much. I mean, you want very, very little. You need very little. But, you know, it's very subtle. You know, but they give this service here. But not as if they were doing you any big favor or that, you know. Seems to come natural. You know, it's as if they have this type of, they've said, this is how we want things. Things should be this way for patients. And they stick up to it, you know. Here in the hospice, it's very quiet, it's very peaceful, which is what I need, you know. It's totally stress-free. You can sleep very quietly at night, and everything is very peaceful. Whereas my life outside was kind of amid the hustle and bustle of normal, everyday life, you know. And I had done so much, and I also had plans to do many other things, which just overnight I realized couldn't be done or never would.
In spirit, Pauline is strong. Her belief in Eastern thought has helped her face the future.
They say that nothing can happen to you that isn't your destiny, and that everything that happens is for the best. You mightn't realize it at the time, but it somehow seems to make sense that this is my life. I mean, some people have long lives, other people have short lives. The important thing is to live it while you're alive. And then, as I say, I've seen people passing away here, and they've passed away so peacefully. It was like 1 minute they were breathing, and then the next minute they weren't. They had just passed on, and they all seemed to have a smile on their face, which led one to believe that life on the other side can't be so terrible. I've been thinking and reading and I experience great joy and peace from within. I can't say where, but it's definitely there. And there's a part of me that's not lonely or worried about losing this body. Even though I must say I'd like to live. I could live forever. I enjoy life very much. I mean, I enjoy thinking what I could have done. I enjoy thinking that I might have done so much more. But it can't be done, so what can you do? Look on the bright side of things.
Television Times.